Farmers in the Netherlands are fighting for their lives over government climate control mandates, and it appears there is no end in sight to their protest. Dutch officials insisting on abiding by European rules, while the farmers say the restrictions on the use of nitrogen will put them out of business. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, the former U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands says the EU mandates could lead to brownouts and home heating oil and food shortages.
Roughly 30 to 50% of the farmers may actually lose their farms. They will lose the freedom to farm. They'll have to go find another occupation.
And that will, of course, cause food shortages, right?
Well, the Dutch are phenomenal exporters of food. They're the second, third, fourth largest exporter of food globally. This is a country of 17 million people. The Dutch will not experience food shortages. But there may be other parts of the world that will, because this food is going to go away. And these are restrictions that are being put in not necessarily by the Dutch government, but are being imposed on the Dutch by Brussels, by the European Union.
Well, how can the Netherlands and the European Union then back off from these climate change regulations without violating the Paris Treaty on Climate Change? Can they do that?
Well, they're already starting to violate the Paris Climate Agreement. They became dependent on Russia for their natural gas and fuels. And I think the Germans have just recently announced that they're going to be reopening some of their coal plants. And so they recognize that the goals that in the Paris Climate Agreement are unrealistic, are driving up the cost to their consumers, and going to put them in a position where they're going to have brownouts now, or this fall and winter, there's a real possibility that they're not going to have enough energy to heat their homes. It's going to be a real crisis in Europe.
Well, and the food shortages, I guess there are already some grocery store shelves in the Netherlands that are empty. So is there a compromise solution? What should be done then to satisfy the farmers, but also those pushing climate restrictions? Anything?
Well, the food shortages in the grocery stores right now are because the tractors and the truckers, they're going up to the distribution centers and they're blocking the delivery trucks from making the deliveries. The Dutch always talk about the polder model, where they come together and they reach a consensus. I'm not sure where this one's going to end up. I think the government is pretty much locked in their position that says, we're going to impose these restrictions. The farmers are saying, we want the freedom to farm. I don't know what the resolution is going to be.
It doesn't seem like they're compatible. Those are two opposing views.
They're not.
Yeah. So shifting gears here, President Biden, he says the purpose of his Saudi Arabia trip is to advance a peace deal between the Saudis and the Israelis. And his critics say he's only visiting there to beg the Saudis to step up oil exports to reduce the pain of the pump for Americans. Of course, Biden blames Vladimir Putin's war with Ukraine for the higher prices here. Your thoughts?
Well, Gary, the president clearly, when he took office, indicated that he was going to declare war on fossil fuels. He's been successful. In Michigan, we're paying $4.79 per gallon for gas, significantly higher than what we were paying before, but more than $2 before. His number one focus and priority, as he has stated, is to fix inflation, address this problem for the American consumer. So clearly, his focus in Saudi Arabia is going to be to try to get the Saudis to pump more oil. I hope that he's successful in fostering a peace agreement between the Saudis and the Israelis. A number of countries did this with the Abraham Accords. Let's build off of that. This may be the one policy that the Biden administration has embraced from President Trump. It fundamentally changed the Middle East, and let's build on that, and let's go after and limit the potential of Iran, and let's limit their influence in the region.
Well, let's talk about that a little more. So what would a Saudi-Israeli peace deal mean for the Middle East, especially those efforts to counter Iran?
Well, what it would mean is that we now have 5, 6, 7 countries that would start coming together and recognizing the state of Israel. They would start doing economic business, trade, and engagement with Israel. And you would also then see them come together, hopefully politically, on national security issues, because they have one thing in common. The UAE, Saudi, the Israelis, they all feel threatened by Iran. And hopefully what the result will be is that they will isolate Iran in the region.
Also on tonight's episode of The Global Lane, you're going to hear more from Peter Hoekstra. The former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee says China may have intentionally unleashed the COVID-19 virus on the United States. And a look at government complicity in violence against pro-life pregnancy centers. You can catch those stories and more on The Global Lane. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News Channel or on the CBN News app.